Hey everyone, I'm David Berkowitz, and welcome to another edition of AI Insiders by AI Marketers Guild from Marchitecture. We've got an incredible session today with our IAB friends coming back for another round, and Caroline Giegerich assembling another all-star session. Before, I just wanted to introduce one of my Marchitecture friends and colleagues, Sam Khoury, just to share a couple things about what's coming from Marchitecture next month. So, Sam, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name's Sam. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Marchitecture. Truly just focused on diverse content, a lot of the content that we're doing at the conference, heavily focused on that and how we distribute it and scale it. So just to give you a little background of what I focus on, I did want to kind of present a couple things to you guys today in terms of the conference that we have coming up on March 10th and 11th. This is a little bit of a sales pitch, but not a sales pitch. So just take it as it is. Since everybody here is like heavily focused and loves AI, I think we all in this room or on this call understand how it's going to impact us as marketers, as employees, as technology providers. We know it's going to play a big role, and I think a lot of us are using it regularly, if not daily today. So we're addressing a lot of those concerns at the conference on March 10th, primarily how it plays a role in technology evolution and creation, focusing on the impacts on publishing, focusing on what it means for better data and how to utilize that data. And so I really just wanted to pop in and let you guys know it's happening March 10th and 11th. I'd love all of you to be there. Quick note, it is complimentary if you are a brand or an agency. So just so you know. And then David has some amazing codes that he can provide to the community to discount it further. But really just wanted to come in and say hello.
Well, great to have you here.
Too salesy, David?
No. I mean, it's great heads up. Just I will just quickly ask you the BS-free question that is a little bit pitch tee up. Who are a couple of the speakers you're most looking forward
to? Okay, so we have the commissioner of the FTC speaking. I think that one's really interesting because it's not every day that he's going to sit at a stage and talk to people about policy and changes. I think that's huge. We do have all the holdcos speaking as of right now. So every single holdco has representation at the conference. We have the chief marketing officer of Molson Coors, the CEO of People. But I would say for me, myself, I think FTC is number one. I think the CMO of the NFL is probably number two, especially with the Super Bowl just ending last week. And I would say number three is I really like Lipsman. I don't know if you know him, David, but he's really kind of unfiltered. And I like that in terms of content. So he has a session called Oversold, Overhyped, Overrated.
Okay.
And he's not holding back. Like we've seen what he's talking about. Like there's no BS with this guy, and I love it.
This is Andrew Lipsman?
Andrew Lipsman, yeah.
Uh-huh.
He's great. Like fantastic. And every time he speaks, I'm like, oh my gosh, he said everything I've been thinking of. Thank you. So I think overall it's pretty diverse. So if you're from like an agency, brand, or publisher, it'll be valuable. I think this is very different than our last two conferences, which was a very ad tech heavy.
Yeah.
I think we maxed out on that. So I'll tell the whole room. We had 450 people. It sold out like a month in advance. This is 1,000 people. It's 2 days. We've partnered with Adweek for content tracks. We've partnered with TV Rev.
Right.
Variety is also a partner. So you'll be seeing an email from Variety coming out probably in the next 2 days. So generally, like the content is diverse and that's intentional. The ad tech core is there, but we want to reach beyond just that ad tech core. And so we're trying to address everyone.
Awesome. Well, this is great. I will just have to add that the other thing beyond all of this I'm really looking forward to is Russ and Daughters catering. So
yes,
we can get into all the details, but I don't want to give our panel the short shrift here because we got a lot to talk about disclosure and AI ads and including one of my favorite newsletter writers on the subject now, Debbie Williamson. And so anyway, I'm going to head over.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Sam. This is awesome. So glad to give people a taste of what's going on beyond our AIMG walls too, and what's part of the bigger picture here. So hope to see a lot of folks from this chat in person there. Caroline, who do we have today? We got IAB coming back. And just a reminder for everyone, or for those who are joining us for the first time, this is a community conversation. So everyone's expecting a lot of great questions and participation. But I get to sit back and listen today as Caroline Giegerich brought together some incredible thinkers and doers across the industry to talk about a really important issue right now. So Caroline, floor is all yours.
Well, first of all, thank you, David, as always, for having us. It's great to be in these conversations because this group is so interactive. So as you just said, if you want to put comments, questions in chat, we'll try to go directly to them in thread or off mute or whatever you guys are comfortable with. My name is Caroline Giegerich. I'm VP AI at IAB, which is the Interactive Advertising Bureau. If you're unfamiliar, I like to call it Switzerland amongst the advertising industry. Mm-hmm. We sit between publishers, agencies, brands, tech platforms, and we try to coordinate between many different goals and constituencies, but I think we do a really fantastic job. I am going to bring up to the very beginning just a conversation where we show you a few slides from some research that the very talented Debra Williamson. She is founder and chief analyst of Sonata Insights, did in collaboration with IAB. This is on the topic of AI transparency and disclosure. So we're going to share a few insights, and then we're going to show you a few insights from the framework that we then cultivated to try to answer the questions of why should we disclose AI use in advertising, when, how, and who's responsible. So Debbie, I'll ask you to unmute, and I'm just going to share this presentation and let you take over.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much. And I see a lot of familiar faces. I actually spoke, David, I think at one of the events probably almost 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah, you were early on with before you even went.
Great. Yeah, it's
focus.
Great to be back. And you and I worked together back in the day at eMarketers. So my background is I was an analyst at eMarketer for 19 years, and now I run my own independent research firm focused on AI and consumer behavior. And so this study looked at the gap. We call it the AI ad gap. This is actually the second study. We did one in late 2024. We just published new results in early 2026 from a study we ran late last year among Gen Z and millennial consumers, and also a comparison study among advertising executives who have media budgets ranging from 1 million to up to above 1 billion. So, Caroline, if you want to go ahead and move the next slide. Yeah, so just a few things to set the stage for our conversation. We went into this study thinking that with more exposure to AI-generated advertising and more awareness of the use of AI, that younger consumers, Gen Z and millennial consumers, would feel more positively, more negative towards the concept of AI-generated advertising. And the gap between how ad executives thought they felt versus how the young consumers actually felt widened. And that, I think, sets the tone for why what you did, Caroline, with the framework is so important, because these are people who are really feeling strongly about AI and advertising, and closing that gap is really important. So what's interesting, if we can move to the next slide, is that even the youngest consumers are feeling more negative and less likely to feel positive and use negative attributes to describe companies that use AI to generate advertising. Terms like inauthentic, for example, or disconnected or unethical. We see younger consumers, the Gen Z consumers, more likely to choose those terms. And also we see millennials, on the other hand, more likely to feel positive. I think we would probably discuss that a little bit more, unpack that a little bit more in the presentation, but it's something to kind of tuck away, that these younger consumers that are very much likely to use generative AI in their daily lives are feeling more negative towards it when an advertiser uses it. Now, one important thing, and we're going to talk a whole lot more about disclosure, but one important thing we dug into in the study is the idea of disclosing AI usage. And there's a lot to unpack, which we'll talk about in a few minutes with the panel with Graham and Ken. But leaving you with just a few data points, one thing that we found is that disclosing AI usage actually can drive engagement for advertising. When we ask what would cause people to pay attention to generative AI ads, well, obviously, if the ad was high quality, that makes sense. Funny ads are always interesting, no matter where you see them. Think about all the Super Bowl ads that you might remember. Most of them, quite frankly, are probably funny. But then this idea of disclosure, we're ranked number 3. So again, this is something that we see young people saying, okay, well, maybe we might want to feel more positively about it if there's some way for us to know that we're not being fooled or we're not being, the wool isn't being pulled over our eyes. So if we move on to the next slide, this is actually kind of the money slide, literally, because we found that if an ad generated with AI had a disclosure on it, it really, so for 73% of respondents, it was either had no impact or actually increased their likelihood to purchase from that brand. And only about a quarter said that it would have the impact of being less likely to consider purchasing the brand. So overall, I think we see more upside than downside when advertising to these audiences, again, Gen Z millennial audiences, when you would disclose.
I'm going to ask you one question, Debbie, from Tamika. Thank you for this, Tamika. Are there plans to survey Gen Xers or even older users to find out their POVs on disclosure?
I think, yes, that would be great. I think we would with this audience because we knew that these were, I thought this audience would be interesting to research because these are people who are more likely to use generative AI in their daily lives, right? We just see that in all the consumer surveys and I thought, well, this would be the best audience to survey because these are people who are already very familiar with the concept of generative AI. But I think, Tamika, you are absolutely right that having a full population study would be super interesting. So yeah, Caroline, let's tuck that away for maybe later this year.
Absolutely. And Michael will absolutely get to that question when we get into the panel discussion. But Debbie, moving to the key takeaways.
So just really quickly to the key takeaways, the perception gap is widening. That's something that I think we need to close. We didn't discuss this in the data slides, but it's actually in the full study, which is available on the IAB site. But one thing that advertisers are doing that might be contributing to this is prioritizing efficiency. When we asked advertisers, why are you using AI in your creative process? They ranked efficiency and cost savings above creative quality. And in my opinion, I feel like AI should be used to make ads better and more appealing to consumers and improve your creative. And that should be more important. And I think it would help consumer perception as well. And then finally, transparency, which is probably what we're going to talk about. Which is what we're going to talk about for the rest of the time here, is the transparency around AI and what it means and how it can potentially help consumer perception.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I'm going to take the baton and I'm going to show you a little amuse-bouche, if you will, on the AI transparency and disclosure framework. And Alyssa, I saw you somewhere in the crowd. If you would mind just putting in links in the chat to both the research and the framework, I would be so grateful. I'm going to start with the opportunity and the risk, and I'm just lifting out of what Debbie was just talking about with the research. But on the one hand, the opportunity for AI is quite high. Obviously, there's been exponential adoption. We're here talking about it, and David does these AI insiders every week, so I don't think we ever exhaust of things to talk about. The reduced production costs is real. Especially for public companies who are constantly thinking about efficiencies. So that pressure, not to downgrade it, it's high. Large-scale personalization, we at the IAB are even talking about all the benefits in terms of ROI upside that you can get from personalization and rapid localization. On the risk side, we've got the trust gap. There was a gap that Debbie just talked about, like anything from inauthentic, I don't really like it, to this is creative, cool, but that's as she just mentioned, a pretty wide gap there. Label fatigue is if we decide to label everything AI, then in your brain, and all of us are just going to tune it out. So we don't want to go there. Fragmented regulation, and I'm sure this must come up in this group to some degree, but we've got the federal government that's somewhat light on AI regulation. And then we have a very state-led approach We also have platforms such as TikTok and Instagram who have their own labeling mechanisms. And in the middle of all of this, with this last bullet, is the consumer who's like, what? What is it? Stars? Does that mean AI? Is it this text here? Like, what's going on? Just like sort of in the pinball machine, if you will. Okay. So moving on to our next slide. What we chose to focus on in our framework was this idea of consumer deception. If we're going to come up with a threshold for when we think something should be labeled, what is that threshold? It's, do we think that without this label, this consumer will be deceived? The example I always give, and I'm so sorry to everyone who's heard me use this over and over and over again, but it's my favorite one. If I'm on TikTok and an ad comes up, and it's for some sort of skin cream. I buy too many of them. And I'm like, cool, it's going to solve all of my wrinkle concerns. I buy it. I use it for the recommended 3 weeks. Nothing happens. And come to find out, it was a synthetic influencer this whole time, wasn't labeled, thought it was a real person with perfect skin. That would be, in our view, deception. And we would want it labeled. So this is, just for the record, underneath all the advertising industry regulation that already exists. Okay, this is just an example. There's more in the framework, but on the left side, I'm going to give you an example. What do we think of as high risk? Things like synthetic humans, for instance. Prompt to video and image generation is something we talked about a lot. We can get into it in the panel. Voice clones, digital twins of deceased persons. We can get much more into all of this because these are just words on a slide. However, do not disclose, right? Examples of AI in which we don't think there's deception, things like routine retouching, things like color grading, upscaling, things like it's obviously stylized. Like if we were all in cartoon form here today, you would realize that something had been done to all of us unless you think the world is a cartoon world. And I want to join you there because that sounds lovely. And generic AI background music. So I'm going to tuck this away and bring up the esteemed panelists to the virtual stage to get into this discussion, because I'm sure things are coming up now that you've seen what we're about to talk about. First, I want to introduce Ken Fisher. He's editor-in-chief of Ars Technica. If you don't know about Ars Technica, how? Because we're all lovers of technology. And secondly, Graham Wilkinson, EVP, Chief Innovation Officer, and Global Head of AI at Acxiom. I kind of wanted to call him Crayon because he told us that based on the pronunciation of his name, people mistake the way he says Graham for Crayon. But I'm not going to call you Crayon because that would be disrespectful. Welcome to all of you. If you would unmute so I can officially welcome you to the virtual stage. Okay, we just came out of the Super Bowl and we saw multiple ads that had AI or touting AI capabilities. Anthropic's ad, OpenAI, there were ads that used AI. Let's start with the fundamental question. When does AI use in advertising actually matter? And when is it just white noise?
First, I just want to say thanks for inviting me here. It's so cool to be here and see this side of the business. I spend most of my life in the editorial world. But it's a great question. I feel that, and I'm coming from editorial backgrounds that changes my sensitivities, but I think that disclosure really matters when AI is changing the meaning of something. I think that, as we discussed, as you showed in the slide, it's really just white noise when you're talking about AI as a production tool, as an efficiency tool. But when you start doing things that are changing the meaning or creating a perception that might not be real, I feel like it's always safest to be transparent about that. I think consumers expect that now. Whether or not they do in 5 years is a totally different question. But today, I think it's clear that users want to see that if there's a material change.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's kind of, again, I mean, I agree with what Ken said. And also, Caroline, I mean, you kind of, I think your analogy sums it up well anyway. But I do think it's a matter of like threshold for trust. And that's a matter of perspective too, right? And that's why I suppose the research from Debbie is important, looking at that particular generation, but also looking at other generations, because there are generations where maybe an older generation might say, well, they are just more trusting because they've grown up kind of being bought into TikTok videos that may already be heavily touched up and are nowhere near reality. And therefore their threshold for trust is going to be lower in a relative sense to somebody else. So I think it all comes down to who is the ad being aimed at, and what is our understanding of trust in that, and obviously once it breaks that trust, so it could be something as a celebrity that they entirely trust. They want to know that celebrity was actually like authorized the use of their voice, their image, whatever it was, and but for somebody else that might not be the breaking point. So I think defining and understanding what trust means to different generations and different perspectives is a really key part of it. And there's no, it's a moving target.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, I have two daughters who are Gen Z, and they go on social media and they watch AI videos a lot. They love them. They share them with me. They're like, oh my God, this is so cool. Look at this. And they buy into all the trends, but they know that they're AI. And I think that's where the challenge is and where the difference is like if they're not being if they're bought into it, if they're part of the conversation, if they get it, if AI is used like in a way that they're like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, they love it. But if they're being fooled, or if they think it looks fake, or if it looks like slop, that's where my daughters get really they get really negative toward it, right? So for me, it comes down to trust, but it also comes down to just being honest and open, and maybe bringing your audience in on the joke or in on the game or whatever it is that you're doing with AI. That's the thing that I take away.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also, picking up on something you said, Graham, for the record, Graham and Ken were part of the working groups that we had to do this framework for months. So we talked about this for months. And the reason we did is because there's so many edge cases. And what Graham just talked about in terms of perception, there is going to be a movable line of perception also. Like how we all on this call think about AI is going to change over time. So we recognize that all of what we put here may shift in a good 6 months. So just to mention, I also just wanted to pick up on some questions from the chat. Derek asks, why would I use synthetic humans in a testimonial? And I see Misha's response is interesting in terms of it converts better. Sometimes also an example would be, we've all seen Jennifer Aniston in the Smart Water commercial. Let's say Jennifer Aniston is, I don't know, in Bali, having the time of her life in Bali, but isn't able to come to the set in Chicago. What if she could send her digital twin? It's completely authorized. It's actually much cheaper than flying her from Indonesia to Chicago. That would be an example of, it would be a digital twin of her, completely synthetic. Maybe it's just the look and feel of the person that you wanted and how fast you wanted it. So I also want to ask this question to Ken. Marshall asks, Ken, can you give us an example or examples of AI changing the meaning of what is being conveyed or advertised?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the example you gave, Caroline, very early at the outset of, synthetic influencer, I think that's a great example where, if you're creating a person who is reaping the benefits of a given product, but then that person isn't real, I think that is a good example of an area that is icky. I think you can also do simulated authority. It's adjacent to how I think about influencers, but right, if you watch an ad and the guy's saying 9 out of 10 dentists say whatever, it'll say like actor portrayal or whatever. Like we're always very careful about that. So what if a financial industry wants to run an ad that has I don't know, what were those guys, E.F. Hutton? Remember those old E.F. Hutton ads?
Yeah.
You create the new digital E.F. Hutton. I think that, that would be an attempt to create what is essentially a highly credentialed but fake representation of authority. Another thing I think of is, product realities being faked. If you show someone suddenly can dunk and they couldn't dunk before, or these kinds of things, I think you can augment human capability, and that means also their reaction to products in a way that's not realistic. And I just want to circle back. I think that it's very interesting that Debbie's research is showing that there is this gap, because you have people who want really creative and interesting ads, and then you have people that are hyper focused on the trust aspect. And I think that between those two possible trajectories, if you will, the trust aspect is the more dangerous territory right now. And that's why I think we want to really advise advertisers to stay away from those areas if there's any way it's going to come off as essentially faking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's real sensitivity around the faking stuff. And also, I was also very, very interested to see the advertising industry is also seeing some people being aware that, AI is just a way to save money. And on the journalism side of the fence, I can tell you that's the consumer perception everywhere and why they hate it. They feel like you're cheapening this, and you're making it less real because all you care about is money.
That sounds like quality. That sounds like a quality concern. Like if you're cheapening or reducing the money, are you reducing the quality of the content? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
No, I mean, on the edit side, even if the quality was just as good, I would say we would have people that would be very upset the idea that we're using a tool simply to save money when there were traditional ways of doing it that in their view are just as good.
Interesting. Can I ask a follow-up question? Because we sort of talked about this in the prep call, but I think of your readers as a very niche audience because it's Ars Technica, it's emerging technology, aficionados. Do you think that is relative of the broader audience, or do you think that is a signal from your specific audience?
I think it's very interesting because it seems to be in pockets of community. So for instance, at Ars Technica, I think broadly, I'd say most readers are incredibly suspicious of AI. But there are other brands in the building that aren't necessarily demographically different, whose readers are they embrace it. They're like, oh, this is great. I want to see more AI stuff. And I think what we have learned is that you can't guess this. If somebody had said, a GQ reader is going to think this about AI, you'll be wrong. You'll be wrong when you collect the data, because these pockets of communities, I think they take this is one way I think about it. I think these online communities, they all take creativity differently, and they get something different from creativity. And so in as much as these tools are touching on creativity, that's where I think you get different levels of response. And to me, it's a minefield. And that's why I always say, be safe, not sorry.
I also, can I just add that
Absolutely.
I think what Ken brought up about sensitivity is important. I also think there's people have been desensitized as well. There's kind of equal and opposite, right? And people think, there are groups of people that think it is okay for things to be entirely fake as long as it's funny and maybe they're not the butt of the joke, right? But the consumer doesn't always have to be the person being deceived. Like think of a tour, a travel ad where a celebrity is being superimposed on a location, and that location doesn't want to be associated with that celebrity. Maybe they're controversial and they know that celebrity never even visited there. That's disingenuous. And actually the subject of the deception is not just the consumer, it's the location itself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that as much as there are groups who are sensitive, there are groups who are alarmingly desensitized to it. And that's why, again, we talked ad nauseum about the balance of giving people notifications on this type of information, and the fatigue associated with it, but also a duty to the industry to kind of stay honest in what we're doing. As I said, there's no silver bullet, but it is important to think about all the aspects of it.
Well, this also brings up the example that we talked about a lot. How many people here are New York City or in the general New York City area? David, for sure, I know. Okay. So we had a mayoral race in which Andrew Cuomo was one of the candidates, and he did an ad in which it was his digital twin in a variety of activities that he never did in real life. And of course, there was a label at the bottom of the ad. You would say, okay, that's his digital twin. He endorsed it, right? Because it was for his ad. But wait a second, he's now in a variety of activities that he didn't do. So doesn't that seem like deception? Because people could potentially change their vote if they're like, oh, Andrew Cuomo. I don't even remember the activities in the ad, so I can't speak to them. But there could be some consumer deception there, and we thought long and hard about that.
I mean, I want to jump in because I watched that ad, and I live in Seattle, so I have no interest whatsoever in the mayoral race in New York. Well, I do, but anyway. But the point of what I wanted to make was the way that the AI was woven into the ad pulled the audience into the idea. Like, you knew, he said, he said something like, these are not things that I would actually do, but this is what I can do for New York City. And so he used these crazy, AI generated scenarios as part of the creative of the ad to demonstrate something else. And that, to me, goes back to, well, why wouldn't you just bring your audience along on the idea? Like, just, if you're using AI, make it part of the idea.
Let me ask you, though. So do you think it needs to be unlabeled or labeled?
Oh, I think it does need to be labeled. And I know when we did the research, we asked what types of industry ad categories should have labeling. And I think political was one of the top. And I believe that's very true. And I would definitely vouch for it. So I think it's smart that it was labeled. But I think the idea of the creative incorporating the AI part of it into the conversation of the ad was what made it work for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to turn back to you because I have another question for you. I want to know, from all of the research that you worked on with us, what was the most surprising discovery from all of it?
Well, I mean, the fact that the gap widened, I think, from the previous research in late 24 to the research in late 25, the fact that the gap between ad executives and how they felt about how they thought younger consumers felt and how younger consumers actually felt was probably the biggest surprise for me, because I thought with more awareness to AI-generated advertising that we would see more acceptance and more positive feelings toward it. I think the Gen Z part was also really interesting. The Gen Z is even more negative. And for me, I feel like maybe it's because they use AI so much and they're so attuned to it that they really want it on their own terms. They want to be able to go, use it on their own terms, but also appreciate other people's use of it on their terms. And when they're, as art, as creativity, as something that they really value. I also think, too, just generally, Gen Z is more skeptical and discerning of advertising messages generally. And we see that in other kinds of research about marketing effectiveness. So that could be another factor as well.
I like Tamika's comment. Perhaps it reflects the broader sentiment of Gen Z being overwhelmed and more anxious because of tech. We did talk about that, especially because entry-level jobs are being heavily disintermediated, and those would be their jobs. I'm going back to something you just said, Graham, about the desensitization. Ooh, that's a big word for me. I'm wondering if maybe when we do this study again, we ask, how do you feel? Maybe indifferent. Because I think when we hit like a plateau of the tech is when it's invisible, i.e. we're not talking about all the AI and the ad anymore. Just it's an ad and we don't care how it was produced. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's the awkward time that we're in at the moment, right? I said this a lot. We're in the in-between where the tech is in everybody's hands, but honestly, it just hasn't matured enough from the way consumers are using it, the way it's embedded in processes and businesses. And so, the Model T has been invented and there's no roads to drive on. And so people are driving all over the place. They're modifying their Model T so that it drives better off-road, and instead of focusing on building roads where more people can drive and like you can get places faster, right? So we're just in this weird in-between time. So I think, the research that Debbie has done, which is crucial, has to be like at this moment in time done faster, Debbie. Do it faster and more of it. Because things are just changing so rapidly, right? Like and even the window we get into it is already obsolete by the time we look at it, and that's the speed of AI. Like that's the double-edged sword of this whole situation.
But I'll just say, I totally agree with that. But one of the things I heard from somebody else at Conde when we were talking about this, AI is fast, but the loss of trust is immediate. It's instantaneous. And I think that is one of the things that I think we try to bake into what we work. It's like, yeah, we may have to revisit our governance. We have to revisit these things. There's going to be a cadence, but we should be very sober about it. We should resist, the shiny new thing and running after it like fools, because that trust loss will get you in minutes. It's not a developing thing if you get caught in it. So I think that's just one thing about the speed is I know it creates a lot of anxiety for FOMO, but the other side of that is the damage to trust is insane.
I like that a lot. It's the saying, a moment on the lips, lifetime on the hips. I think that's the learning, though. It's like I get incredibly nervous around anyone who swings either incredibly overtly bullish or bearish on anything, because I think the nuance somewhere in the middle is the place to try to be always. So I really like that perspective. Graham, I also want to ask you about something from your particular place at Acxiom. You're at this intersection of data and personalization. We talked about personalization quite a bit when we were trying to think about transparency. So as you're innovating with AI for audience targeting, personalization, where does transparency fit there?
A lot of my time personally is spent with marketing departments and doing this really boring exercise of mapping out agentic flows. And the reason being is that so many people have jumped into AI and built what I would call low resolution solutions. And there are so many problems come with low resolution solutions. Is they go, oh, I've built a brief writer, or I want to build a brief writer. And then you say, well, what does that mean? What does a brief writer do? How many tasks are like nested under that? And people can't explain it. And that's the problem, right? Because if you can't explain it, you can't get to what we're talking about, which is supplying metadata associated with not just the output itself, but the decisions, the reasoning, the reason tracing that sits behind it. But also, it just results in a generalized response. So I think a big part of like where we're focused is not necessarily, hey, this is how you should use Acxiom data. This is how you should use audiences. It's more, hey, let's actually like look at your entire process and break it down. And we carry out this thing called recursive task atomicism. And essentially, we break every task down to its atomic state, and its atomic state being defined as something that has one persona. If it uses a tool, it only uses one tool or API connection. And thirdly, its output can be judged by a pass-fail binary response. Now, if you can break a description like a brief writer down into its constituent tasks, and every one of those tasks output can be judged by a pass-fail output, then what it means is that, one, you're going to mitigate risk associated with your use of it in the advertising process. Two, if you have to explain why something was done, you can actually trace it back very, very easily. And three, and what I'm realizing most is that most businesses cannot articulate the processes that they carry out on a day-to-day basis in that level of definition. And that is a big, big problem. But also for us, it means that once we have that map, we can actually say, hey, these are the points where you can inject data. And that could be, you can inject it because it's low risk. It could be, you can inject it because it's going to have a multiplying effect on the thing that you're doing. Maybe it does something that humans are just not possible. It's not possible for them to do if they undertake that process. So it's kind of, for me, the focus is less on like what Acxiom sell and actually saying to brands, just take a step back. Let me show you that, like, really, for you to get to like the ROIs that you're under pressure to achieve for efficiency and things like that, you can't do it with these low definition AI solutions. You have to go deep into it, and you need to, like, you know, I mean, and actually one of the byproducts of it is it tends to bring to the surface the people who are more leaned into system thinking, and also highlights people who maybe are more rigidly stuck in their ways. Maybe they generally are the people who cannot explain very well what it is that they do, but they've done it for a long time. And so it's a part of the organizational transformation too. But that is big. It's pretty much where I spend 99% of my time these days.
Well, I also think it connects to what Ken was just talking about. Like, yes, that was about breaking trust, but you're talking about also applying some nuance to how you're thinking about like full context needed before optimal AI operating behavior, let's call it, which is the same sort of like system thinking in a way. But Debbie, I wanted to turn it back to you because we did not show in the slides earlier, like the nuance around what the data was telling us in terms of what consumers wanted transparency around and what maybe they didn't care about so much. So could you give us some clarity on that?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I am going back up to get the study in front of me so I don't missay. Okay, yeah, it's 9:45 in the morning here, and I still haven't had enough coffee. I can't say the words I want to say this morning. Yeah, so when it comes to the types of ad creative techniques that people want disclosed, there's actually really strong alignment between how the younger consumers in our study felt and how the ad executives felt. And so, like, the largest percentage of people said, for example, if an ad is 100% AI generated, 57% of advertisers, 58% of consumers said that, yes, that should be disclosed. Similar for AI generated images. When it comes to video, there was a bit more discrepancy. 48% of advertisers said they thought that should be disclosed, but 57% of consumers wanted it disclosed. So almost as actually the exact same percentage as of consumers wanted that the ad to be, if the ad was 100% AI generated, they wanted that disclosed. Things that were less likely to be wanting to be disclosed were AI generated copy, or like, AI generated avatars were somewhat less likely to be desired to be disclosed. But I feel like, it's kind of obvious, right? Like, if everything is AI, let's disclose it. If we're using a lot of AI images, let's disclose it. Video, another thing. So those are kind of the top takeaways. And what was really interesting to me again was that advertisers were pretty much aligned. Like, we kind of agree similarly to what consumers feel about the disclosure.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm glad we're aligned. I also wanted to get deeper into this conversation, both for the panelists and all of you. There's a lot of things that I see coming through in the chat are about the specific nuance of, I saw, let's see, Elena, hopefully it's not Elena. Is it Elena? Did I get it right? Yeah, girl. I like how you brought up, I wonder if the scrutiny into AI, if there's additional scrutiny around photoshopping. And we did talk about this because there's photoshopping, there's Photoshop with an enhanced AI in it. And then is there any nuance for the consumer? Like, we actually chose to think no in this case, because if we hadn't been disclosing it before, why would we disclose it now? But what I wanted to do, because I thought it would be fun, is show us an ad. Plus, I really wanted the reason to like bring a Paris Hilton video into this conversation. And the panelists agreed with me. So I'm going to show you 2 ads. Does anyone here, just a show of like emojis or hands, remember the Paris Hilton ad from like 2005 or 2006 in which she's eating a Carl's Jr. hamburger on a car and like spraying herself with water? Anybody? Okay, Derek, Ken, Peter, Michael, Debbie. Okay, so enough people. So I'm going to show that one first just to remind us all of what we're about to talk about.
Oh man, my bad. It's all good. Look, famous Star Watch. I'm used to late.
Okay. Good boys.
Yeah.
Buy one, get one for $1.
We're going again. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things to mention. First of all, the versions of Paris in which she's in the bathing suit, like they're trying to draw your attention to the fact that that's the digital twin of her because of the blue eyes, right? That's the digital twin of her, not real Paris. The real Paris was her in the pink jumpsuit at the end when she comes out to them in the car wash. Okay. But my question for our panelists, just to get this jumped off, and I'd love to know actually from everyone. So this is going to be a global question. So just put your answer into the chat here. Do you think any part of that ad needs to be disclosed as AI usage? Just say yes or no. No's. Yes. No. I don't know, Marshall. Very honest. Honestly, it feels very split here so far. No. Thanks, Nate. Okay. So I want to get a little deeper into panel. Ken, let's go to you first. Your answer was no, I believe.
Yeah. I think that there's going to be situations where it's obviously not real. I don't say obvious. I think maybe saying obviously AI might assume too much on the viewers' awareness of technology trends, but I think even my grandmother would be able to watch that ad and know, okay, they didn't clone this Paris Hilton person and give them laser eyes. It's in the same way that we're not requiring cartoon avatars of famous people to be I think it passes an obviousness threshold for being manipulated with technology.
Fair. Graham, what are your thoughts?
I said yeah, and I think two reasons. One is when you are intermingling real and AI generated, you're kind of inferring or at least giving the impression to people that maybe it's one or the other. And I think too, like in a world where vanity and appearance and all these things has become heightened and heightened and heightened, and at the same time we all are apparently way more anxious and everything else. Like, again, it's this idea of, are you setting unreal expectations for people that view this? Like, Paris Hilton is a lot older these days than she was back in that
Ouch, Graham.
ad.
Ouch. Come on.
No, I mean, look, she's a beautiful lady, but also it is, there is a reality aspect of it. And as much as maybe as a man, you can sit there and go, hey, it makes no difference to me, I couldn't care less. As a young girl, does that make a difference to you? And I think that it's not necessarily an AI problem. AI is just the thing that maybe is that is the tool that's being used, right? But there's a problem with, perception and how you set expectations that are unrealistic for people, certainly in a world where you can go and log on for 5 minutes and get yourself a GLP-1 because not necessarily you're morbidly obese, but you just want to lose a little bit of weight because you feel a ton of pressure from society to look better, right? And look better being a subjective thing. So I think, it's less of AI can be named as the bad guy in this, but I also think AI will just exacerbate bad actors, which we know that already. could see Ken vigorously nodding.
Yeah, Ken agrees with you. I also think it's incredibly interesting because something that came up in my mind on the organic content side of things, and this is because I was at Warner Music Group before and thought about this nonstop, was the ABBA experience and how they brought them back, obviously, as the younger versions of themselves and used voice clones of the younger versions of themselves. Now, I would hope everyone would realize that ABBA is not perpetually youthful. But I mean, I haven't thought about the larger societal implications, like the Kiss experience. They want to do the exact same thing, but them as a younger band. I haven't actually thought through, and Grant, this is why I love you so much, because you constantly ping it into new parts of my brain. But Debbie, let's get to yours. Was it a yes or a no?
I was a yes. And I think it's because I feel that right now, I wouldn't say yes forever, but right now, it may not be obvious to everybody that there's AI. And we saw in the research that disclosing didn't have a huge impact on purchase likelihood. And it made people, it was one of its drivers of attention in addition to high quality visuals and funny content. And I would agree, this is funny content and it was pretty high quality visuals. So I feel like there's not a downside to putting a little disclosure on this ad. There's actually more of an upside. But the true test, I think, is, okay, we're selling hamburgers. Like, did Carl's Jr. actually sell more hamburgers? How did this buy one, get one offer do? So that's actually the true test of, did this ad perform, outside of whether or not they used AI.
Well, and I'll come back to our framework, which, just for the record, would have said no disclosure necessary. And the reason why it would have said no disclosure necessary is because there's no real deception in using a digital twin that Paris Hilton has authorized. And whether people realize, like, multiple Parises, she didn't just somehow have like a bunch of twins that she never disclosed in her lifetime. Like, we would not recommend disclosure there. And we would also say so because we're being nuanced about what we want labeled, because we don't want it to lead to label fatigue. But what I think this conversation should elucidate is that this is a constantly moving target of perceptions and trying to figure out, and that it's not an easy discussion. It was one that took us many months to even get to some semblance of this is what we think for now. But I know we're coming up on time, so I will just ask a closing question for all of the panelists. If you could give all the people in the room one piece of guidance on navigating AI transparency right now, what would your advice to them be?
I'll go ahead and start. I believe that using AI to improve your creativity should be the top reason you do it. If you believe that AI will actually be cheaper, yes, but if you go into it with the idea that you're going to be able to produce lots and lots of ads very cheaply, they're going to look that way. And I don't think that over time consumers are going to react positively. So I think always have that creative North Star in your mind when you're using AI.
Yeah, I think I would say, even though I said no with regards to this ad, I would just say, think about and treat transparency as a long-term brand investment strategy instead of a short-term performance variable for your campaigns. I think because of the rate of change and how much the space will change over the next 2 years, something that we think today is no problem, could very well be a problem in a year. You never know what scandal might change public perception, et cetera. So I just think that transparency is like this. It's the safety valve for experimentation with AI.
Yeah, and I would kind of harp on my my point around understanding better the processes that you deploy AI into. I mean, forget consumers and anybody else, but like, you're deceiving yourself if you can't understand how the output was kind of generated fundamentally. And I don't mean like you have to understand how neural networks work, but if you give a generalized task to a generalized agent, it is going to give you something that is very difficult to unpick and explain. And at the end of the day, like, I think that, we should be focused on being more precise in our outputs. It doesn't restrict creativity. To Deborah's point, it enhances it, I believe. But I think put much more thought and effort into, why does this process work? How do I do this task as a human being? And don't devalue your natural skills as a human being because we kind of just take them for granted that we can do all these multifaceted things and actually, try to figure out what those things are and what it means to be human, because that'll make you super awesome at using AI.
I'd love to do an AI Insiders, David, on what it means to be human.
Oh, yeah. Well, after just going on some AI dates last week at a real world cafe.
Wait, did you go to the pop-up?
I was quoted in the New York Times for going to the pop-up. Are you kidding?
And put the link.
Oh,
in the chat
my.
so we all can read what?
Oh, yeah.
Does everybody know about the pop-up where you can date in the AI that's happening in New York? Nate, we should go. That would be a fun video for us to test this out.
Oh, boy.
David, I want to read your comments immediately.
Yeah, that was my dinner date with AI. I'm putting this in the chat right now. So this is very top of mind. And we will actually have a session on that. We had to schedule it a little bit later because we have amazing sessions like this already scheduled. But Robin Gelfenbein, this incredible comedian who did this with me back to back. We're going to have
when is that session? Tell us all.
It's not until March 25th, but we'll get into it. We'll do a he said, she said version, and it's going to be a ton because these issues are going to be bubbling up for a long time. So.
Well, thank you for having us. And thank you to Debbie, Graham, and Ken. You guys are
thank you all. I put in the chat, I've literally never seen a session go by this quickly. I thought we had tons more time. So thank you all. And if you ever want to do a longer version of this, you've got the invite here. So
thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Yeah, incredible questions. Caroline, I'm happy to share the questions with you, too, in case you missed any of the comments and
thank you.
As you want to follow up on. So thank you all. This is great. Hope to see some of you, as Sam mentioned, Marchitecture Live in a few weeks. And see you next week for a session on vibe coding for good.